Hello, 8th graders, and today we're going to start chapter 3. So, this chapter is about functions, and our first lesson today is going to be taking some data from actual real life stories and making a graph out of it so we can see how to kind of graph a real life scenario. So, we're going to be starting off with this example with Tamira. On Memorial Day, Tamira and her family went on a day trip to an outlet mall. So they left their house at 9 a.m. and traveled at a constant speed for 1 hour. They arrived at the mall just as the stores opened and they shopped for 2 hours. They then drove farther away from home for 15 minutes at a constant speed that was slower than the speed at which they drove to the mall. Then they stopped at a local cafe for 1 hour to enjoy some lunch. After their lunch break, they returned home, still at a constant rate of speed, but traffic was very heavy, so they had to travel much more slowly than they had earlier in the day. And as I was going through this, I also noticed they left out a piece of information in this paragraph that was in the original lesson. The whole trip altogether took a total of 10 hours. So Tamira's trip took a total of 10 hours and looks like it can be divided into 5 different segments. So we're going to kind of chunk up the length of time and the speed of the car for each of these segments. So the first segment you'll see I have highlighted in pink, and it's that they left their house at 9 a.m. and traveled at a constant speed for 1 hour. So the length of time that they traveled was for 1 hour. And then the speed of the car was a constant speed, they said. And they don't share it in this paragraph, but in my teacher instructions, it says that they traveled at this constant speed for 70 miles. So the next segment I have highlighted in an orange color, and this is where they arrived at the mall and they shopped for 2 hours. So our length of time is 2 hours, but because we're not going anywhere, we're just stopped in the mall and we're shopping, we're not driving further away, we're staying in that same spot that's going to be, the speed is 0. Now let's graph the third segment, which I have highlighted in yellow. So they then drove farther away from home for 15 minutes at a constant speed that was slower than the speed at which they drove to the mall. So I'm going to come down here to see. So the amount of time it took them to drive was 15 minutes. And the speed was at a constant speed for 10 more miles. The next segment says that they then stopped at a local cafe for 1 hour to enjoy some lunch. So the length of time would be 1 hour, and the speed, because they're stopped, would be 0. So just like when they were shopping at the mall, because they're stopped and they're eating now, their speed is going to be represented by 0. And then finally, we just have this last one, this last segment, where after their lunch break, they return home. Still at a constant rate, but this time there was a traffic jam. Traffic was extremely heavy, so they had to travel much more slowly than they had earlier in the day. And also remember, I had told you that the entire trip took 10 minutes or 10 hours, so we're going to include that in this speed. So for the time on this last segment, we're not really sure, but we do know that the entire trip took took 10 hours. So I'm going to write that in the box. And then our speed was a constant speed for the entire 80 miles back home. All right. So now we're going to take this information and I'm going to show you how we can turn this into a graph of a real life situation.